outrage in London after a young woman was killed.
Police broke up this vigil held in her honor last night.
On March 3rd, CCTV caught Sarah Everard walking home in London around 9:30 p.m. A week later, her body found here. Her death has sparked a movement, women around the world now sharing their stories. Globally, an estimated 87,000 women are killed annually. It happens everywhere, and Sarah's case has hit home for so many.
Her death sparking a reckoning over women threatened by male violence. Stories of harassment and assault shared by thousands on social media.
This has affected every woman across the country. What it's done is it's kicked up every single thing that's ever happened to us.
The suspect, 48-year-old Wayne Cousins, an elite police officer.
We want women's rights to be upheld. We want education systems to uphold these values and teach young boys at a young age.
I had learned all the tricks, I'd learned the keys in my hand and using a weapon, how to sort of stand on the street, what to do if somebody was following me late at night. What were they teaching boys and men to do?
Dead women is a thing we've all just accepted as part of our daily lives.
Many of the women who left flowers here have voiced frustrations that the authorities do not take crimes against women seriously enough.
Not all men. Not all men are rapists and abusers. Not all men are kidnappers or hoping to use her. Not all men are supposed to be feared, but how do you tell your little girl to steer clear of every stranger she sees, every man she meets? We are not born with these fears, but they develop throughout the years. Who is good and who is bad? The reality of this whole situation is more than sad. Not every hero wears a cape, so we don't know which way to gravitate. Not all men are evil, as some are pure. In some ways, they are like a field of dandelions in the clear. These plants you see are not flowers, but weeds. When we see them, they don't cause us to retreat. They grow all over and cause people to come over, make a wish, and blow the seeds off the weed. This action only causes more weeds to grow, but as a kid, how are you supposed to know? It looks like a flower, but it is a weed. People are unable to identify the truth underneath.
Is it better to fear all men than to face the consequences of trusting them all?
I would say that I don't fear men, but I would say I take precautions around all men. And then if they seem like they're not harmful in any way, then I end up trusting them more than if I found a different person. So yeah, I think that I guess quote unquote fear all men until I can find a reason why I should not.
Women are constantly, women are more likely to be sexually assaulted. Women are more often the victims of stalking, more often the victims of domestic violence. There are so many things that women have to take into account that men take for granted. It's terrible, but it's the reality that we live in, and it's just unfortunate. I mean, a lot of men don't realize that they're a problem. A decent amount of men are a problem and they don't know it, or some of them do and don't care.
True. I would say that it's become very relevant to hear a lot of my female friends saying they're afraid of men, and I don't know if that stands true to people you're friends with, and maybe you've heard that, maybe you haven't. But if someone were to say not all men to me, I would hear that as it's not that all men are bad or all men should be feared, but at the same time, You can't just look at someone and say, oh, that person looks safe. I can't look at someone and tell what their intentions are. So it's not that all men are bad, it's just that they don't know who to fear and who not to fear, if that makes sense. Do you guys think that parents should explain to kids like why they shouldn't talk to strangers and all of like the reasons they should be fearful?
So I think that as soon as it's comprehensible for a kid to understand, I wouldn't say go out of your way of explaining every detail of what they could do to you, but I think explaining that they can hurt you to a kid would make more sense to them. Even if they ask like, there's someone hurt in my car won't start, can you help me find my keys, anything like that, I think should be explained to a kid that you should get an adult for that and that you shouldn't go help them yourself, because if you think of it logically, how much can a kid actually help looking like starting a car or helping a hurt person? It is better to get an adult for that, because they most likely have a cell phone and are able to call 911 if they need help.
Like, walk me through you like walking out of the grocery store at night to your car. Like, what are all the things you would do?
So usually I have my car like make a noise like I was locking it or something. I'd never unlock my car. I would always press the lock button to find my car, to locate it. Then I would see if there's cars near it, and if there are, if they are on or if they're off. I would determine if there's someone driving, how busy it is, and I determine if my car is still is underneath like a bright light, because if it is, then I feel safer than if it's not. And then I would usually walk with the keys already in my hands, because I've heard multiple stories about women who left their keys in their bag, and when they went digging for their keys, someone has walked up and kidnapped them before. So I always walk up to my car with the keys in my hand. And even like for my work, it's just, like 2 parking spots over from the front entrance. I still walk out with my keys in my hands, even in broad daylight. So for me, I walk out with my keys in my hands. I make sure I'm very aware of my surroundings. I do not have earbuds in. And I make sure that I'm able to get in my car. When I get in my car, I immediately lock the doors and turn on my headlights so that I can see in front of me. And I check usually all my mirrors before I leave the parking lot.
I personally do very similar things, and I always like bend over and like look under the car, especially because it's like some people will like hide under your car and like hit your ankles to like kidnap you. It seems like there's so much that we have to do just to feel safe, and I feel like that's the issue, is like it shouldn't be our responsibility to do these things to feel safe. And I know the world's not a perfect place. I just wish that it wouldn't have to be like this. What do you do when you're going to your car?
Well, there's a difference between me going to the grocery store at day and at night. When I'm at the day, I park closer to the exit because I don't like being around a lot of people. But if I go to the grocery store at night, usually it's only like Schnucks, which is like 5 minutes away from my house. And so I park more in the middle because there's a lot less cars in the parking lot. And otherwise I just go in one and then back out the same door before. But I park like somewhere in the middle so I don't have to walk real far. But I park a lot closer, and I just walk in and I get whatever I need, and on my way out, I leave, and then when I get close enough to my car, I take my keys out of my pocket, and I unlock the door and I get in, and the first thing I always do whenever I get into my car, the door's shut, I'm locking the door. Just because I don't want somebody coming in and, getting to me or stealing my car.
But everything you did before locking your doors was for convenience, like where you parked was more of a convenience rather than to feel safe?
Yep, just for a convenience. Because in the Schnucks parking lot, there's plenty of lights like everywhere. But there's lots of lights. There's lights coming off of the store right there in the front, and there's plenty of lights like in the parking lot for, to shed light.
But bad things could still happen in the daylight. It doesn't necessarily mean like it's protection though. But don't you think like if people work together and spread awareness and work to make different situations safer for people and things like that, like it would be a better place. It might not be the best place, but isn't better than nothing?
Well, yes, it would be better, but no matter how much you do stuff will still happen.
But isn't saving one life better than none?
Yes.
What do you think about the term "not all men," if you're familiar with it?
It's stupid because men who aren't part of the problem acknowledge that there is a problem and also know that if they aren't a part of the problem, then they aren't getting upset by that because they know there's a decent enough population of men who are causing problems, and there's a decent enough population of women who are having these problems. And so the phrase "not all men" is ridiculous. It reminds me a lot of responding to like Black Lives Matter with All Lives Matter. What I've seen with "not all men" is it tends to be the men that are actually a part of the problem who are like, no, it's not all of us. And the men who aren't actually a part of the problem tend to understand when they are, when criticisms of men in general are being levied, they understand that it is two problematic men, and the ones who aren't a part of the problem know that it doesn't really, like, it's not necessarily a semantic distinction that matters all that much. Because if you get upset when someone is discussing the problems that men cause in our society, you are probably a part of the problem.
So, would you say, like, you don't think it's necessarily the term that's horrible, but how people are using it?
Exactly.
And the people who use it?
Exactly.
Oh, that's interesting. I think the way you stated that was interesting because it's a new perspective that I wouldn't have thought of.
Yeah, just from what I've experienced, I find that a lot of the men that are putting out there that it's not all of us tend to be also the ones that are part of the problem. And the ones who aren't a part of the problem usually just let women have their criticisms and understand that those criticisms are very important and apply to a group of men that they might not be a part of. But they don't feel the need to distinguish themselves in any sense because their actions speak louder than their words.
So would you say, like, you wouldn't, so if a man said the term "not all men" compared to a woman, would you say that the woman would be using it correctly, or you would agree with the way they would most likely be using it?
I would agree. Usually if a woman is using it, they're using it in a different way than men, because there's just a lot of pushback from a lot of men, and it harms any movements overall.
Yeah.
Because when women are using it, it's usually in a sense that men are, there are some good men. When men use it, they're using it to say, hey, not me, not me.
Yeah, like they're
me.
excluding themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.